Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. We are delighted to have you with us. Today is Thursday, February the 5th of 2015. I am your host, Leon Wolf, and I am joined, as always, by my regular panel of co-hosts, Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute, Neal Dewing of the Federalist, Jay Caruso of Pocketful of Liberty. We assume F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon will be with us shortly. And we are joined this week by our guest panelist, who is a contributor at Ricochet and also has his own blog at thewilderness.me. That's thewilderness.me. And we're delighted to have with us a man who you know from Twitter as Red Steez, and his actual name is Stephen Miller. We're glad to have you with us, Stephen. Explain to us what that is that you have on your face right now.
Well, I've starred in many large, highest-grossing films, and Rupert Murdoch just won't pay me for them, so I figured he's going to screw me, so I'm going to just screw him. So here you go. No, that's as far as I'm going. I actually am wearing pants. I'm not actually Randy Quaid here. So
yes, for those who don't know, in a sad and also hilarious turn of events that is really surprising to no one who's followed his career, Randy Quaid has ultimately and truly gone completely off of the deep end. And we wish him all the best of luck in his mental health recovery. So let's drop right into the news of the week, and of course the hot item.
The science guy is here.
Yes,
showed up.
Yes, Bill Nye, the science guy, aka Bill McMorris, is with us. Glad to have you with us, Bill. So let's talk a little bit about this. We're obligated to have you with us. Is that more accurate? So let's talk a little bit about the issue of the week, which somehow has come back around to the vaccinations issue. It's an issue that was kind of kicked off by an answer that Chris Christie gave to a question, an answer that to me didn't strike me as substantively different from Barack Obama's position on the issue, but it's kind of kicked off a media firestorm, and a firestorm that has kind of consumed the internet and Twitter about the vaccination policy in the United States. And Stephen, I'm going to turn this over to you. Our first question traditionally goes to the guest. And so I'm going to ask it of you. There was a great piece in the Federalist by Ben Domenech, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, where he goes into the fact that really vaccinations historically have actually been an issue in the last two presidential campaigns, not just this one. However, this time it is a little different because the issue is not the alleged side effects of the vaccines, whether we're talking about the Gardasil issue or the autism MMR vaccine link and the Lancet study. That's not the issue. The issue is that there has been a return of diseases like measles that were previously thought to be eradicated or almost totally eradicated. And my question for you is, how do you think that is going to affect and shape the course of this particular debate as we go about it during this presidential campaign?
I love how you frame that, because I really, really wanted to sit this debate out. I mean, I don't have kids, and I see people with kids on the side of it that are very, very, very passionate about it. On mainly just vaccinate your damn kids, which is common sense. The way you frame that question is awesome, because where this kind of really gets in my craw is, you see, what my question when this all happened is, why is a Republican governor of New Jersey, while in London, getting a question about a measles outbreak in California, which is all the way across the country from an MSNBC, NBC reporter, Casey Hunt? And I looked at this and I'm like, why is he even getting this question? And the two most striking things about this debate is he got this question 2 days before it was revealed that the administration's cutting $50 million out of the federal immunization program, and then they say, well, this is earmarked, it's for Obamacare, so we don't even need this anymore. So, not to get too kooky conspiracy theory, I look at this no different than George Stephanopoulos asking Mitt Romney in a primary debate, what do you think about birth control? You want to ban birth control. And Romney has no clue what he's talking about. So on a policy level, I looked at this and said, I don't even care about policy right now, because this is all going into 2016. They're basically trying to do gotchas here, gotchas there. Never mind, again, that the Obama administration is trying to cut money from this program. And I don't even care. I don't even care if Christie basically said, you know what, I don't care about immunizations, and I hope, and I like to drink baby blood. The thing I care about right now at this point in time about this debate is candidates who get this question and who don't recognize an obvious trap when they see it. And that's what this thing did to me for this whole past week. Like I said, I really wanted to sit this one out. I just don't think there's a debate here. I think this was to take focus off the fact that there's a measles outbreak in Southern California with a Democrat governor who still hasn't gotten the question what he thinks about vaccinations, with an administration who's cutting $50 million from the program. And I think that this was all just, it was a red herring. It was just shiny, you know, it's dangling the keys. My concern is the candidates that didn't see the obvious, what was happening here. Because if Christie answers it, yes, I demand we vaccinate our kids, Hunt and NBC already have their conclusion. Their conclusion is, oh, well, but you're against the Obamacare mandate. So it's a trap game. They have no way out of it. How I looked at this is, and then of course Rand Paul, and Rand Paul was even worse. And why Rand Paul's comments were worse is because he qualified them as a doctor. He wasn't just a politician offering a policy opinion about this is where I stand. He says I'm a doctor, and I heard lots of stories about vaccinations causing retardation. Well, right there, you just kind of, that was it. Like that's, you know, you just gave the media all they needed to work with that answer. So let me interject real quick here, and we'll come back to Rand Paul here in just a second. But let me interject and say, and throw this over to Jay with a question about your perspective on this. I mean, you know, Stephen's brought up an interesting point. How much of this is really solely a media-generated controversy, and how much of it is a real public policy issue? I mean, definitely I get the point that Stephen's making, which is to say, listen, Christie's got to be ready for this question. He's got to be ready with a better answer than what he gave. But on the other hand, I mean, isn't it also a real public policy issue that candidates should be prepared to face in light of the fact that we do have an actual measles outbreak that's ongoing?
Well, Stephen's right in the sense that this was kind of a setup, a trap, and Christie wasn't ready for it, and his people didn't prepare him for it. His answer really wasn't that controversial. I mean, that's pretty much standard fare, what everybody kind of thinks. Yeah, there should be if you have a religious exemption, you should be able to have one. There's only, I mean, I've seen some people, I think Megyn Kelly had said there should be a federal mandate that everybody should be vaccinated. And, you know, you're crossing constitutional lines if you're going to start to do that. You know, at the same time, though, it does kind of show how either, and I think Rick Wilson, GOP consultant, was going off on it, saying, you know, either Christie wasn't ready or his people didn't prepare him for this, and they should be ashamed of themselves because this was going to be an issue. I do agree with Stephen that, and in fact, we made this point last night. I don't know if it was Amy Otto or if it was Molly Hemingway, was saying, why isn't anybody asking the governor of California about this? I mean, that's where the measles outbreak is. I mean, that's where it's bad. There's nothing going on in New Jersey, so why did this come up? It really doesn't make any sense. There's no reason why he was asked that question, but it seems, it almost, you know, you don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but like Stephen's right, it's almost like a setup. It's like, why in the world did George Stephanopoulos ask Mitt Romney about birth control? You know, and so why would she pose this question? It doesn't make any sense. He just handled it badly. Rand Paul handled it worse, again, especially from the perspective of being a doctor, that he would do this. And like, what kills me now is that because of these two guys, every other potential GOP candidate was just very strong. Yes, vaccinate your kids. They didn't even qualify. They didn't say it should be mandated, but they just said you should vaccinate your kids, and that's it. And that's pretty much where Christie probably should have left it. So now you have a thing where there's actually people going around saying the GOP now has a vaccine problem. You know, they have a problem now with vaccines, and this issue has now become a problem. I think it'll fade away over time, but over the next couple of weeks, this is all anybody's going to be talking about.
Sure. So let me throw this over to Neal next. There was a poll that came out kind of in the wake of this firestorm that's been kicked up. You know, it's a YouGov poll, and it showed that, you know, strong majorities of the entire American population favor mandatory vaccinations. And there's to me, one of the problems with this entire debate is that there are different things that are meant by the word mandatory, right?
Right.
I mean, you have I wrote a post about this yesterday. You have mandatory in the sense of the smallpox vaccine, which is mandatory, which is they would literally go and take babies away from mothers by force and vaccinate them and say, here is your child back. And then there's kind of the MMR mandatory, which is to say in every state that I know of, you can't send your kid to free public school. And then there's Gardasil mandatory that we dealt with in 2012, where you check a box on the form and your kid doesn't get the vaccine. And all that ambiguity in the population favors mandatory vaccination for things like measles, mumps, and rubella. But the YouGov poll specifically broke out that 81% of Democrats and only 67% of Republicans support the mandatory vaccination regime. So there is a discrepancy that seems to exist there. And I think that a lot of people have pointed out that many of the kind of leading lights of this crusade are Hollywood leftists. But it does seem like on the popular level, this sort of anti-vaccination belief has gained temporarily a more solid foothold on the right. Why do you think that that is?
Well, I think there's a lot of tension between the idea of mandatory vaccination and the idea of individual liberties. Obviously, we're going to fall on the side of individual liberties to a greater extent than Democrats. But the thing that I think is crucial here is something that Ben Domenech raised in his post, which is that this sort of thing is nothing new, and governments have been and are and should be empowered to act in the interest of public health. Goes back ages, from the first sewer systems, which were primarily a health measure, down to the smallpox vaccinations, measles, mumps, and rubella. Government is empowered to do this sort of thing where there is a need. What we do need to be mindful of are the very real concerns that some people have. We can't just dismiss people who, for whatever reason, their religion compels them to eschew modern medicine. We have to be respectful of that. And now in a system where people are getting vaccinated to a sufficient degree that these people can be protected by herd immunity, that's great. But what we have are people picking up on this faddish notion that the vaccines are somehow more harmful than they are good, and that they can be sort of free riders and count on herd immunity. Too many people are making that consideration and getting exemptions where they don't necessarily need one. They can't really justify one. It's this. I'm in favor of mandatory vaccination. I do, for all the reasons I stated. It's a no-brainer to me. I think we need to kind of narrow some of these exemptions. But if you look at it, where are these outbreaks taking place? They're not taking place in red state America primarily. They're taking place in blue California, and they're taking place on the East Coast in the Northeast corridor. There's some New York and I think a few others. It is this kind of Whole Foods liberal set that is responsible for this. They've poked holes in our defenses. And so what can happen now is the disease can get in, can get past herd immunity, and it can affect vulnerable populations, and it can affect people who may actually be vaccinated. That's the other thing. These vaccines aren't 100% effective. They're not going to make you immune to the disease necessarily. They make you more resistant to it, make it easier for you to fight it off, but you can still become sick. And so you're introducing a population now where the disease can take hold and break through those lines of defense and possibly mutate, become stronger. You find a new strain of it, and then suddenly your vaccine is less effective. This is incredibly, incredibly short-sighted and foolhardy. But again, I think that the individual liberty concerns have to be respected. We can have that conversation. We can discuss this intelligently, and we can make the case to people, yes, your individual liberty is important, but there is a long-standing tradition in civilization that says that when there is a pressing public health need, the government is empowered to act. You had guys like Richard Epstein, who's a libertarian, big-time libertarian, saying there's no debate on this issue from a constitutional perspective. Government can totally do this. So we need to have that. And we can also have that conversation in the context contrasting it with the Obamacare mandate. So I think it's actually something of an opportunity for Republicans, if we're smart enough, to seize on it, which we're not. So it's going to go very poorly for us.
So Scott, let me throw this over to you, and let's talk a little bit about Rand Paul's comments about this. And Bill, you guys covered it at the Washington Free Beacon. You had the video of what he said on the Alex Jones show, and to me, these are not comments that are just misguided scientifically, but I find them actively despicable, the things that he said about this. Not just, as a doctor, playing up the scare that is completely outside his alleged field of expertise about, public health and matters of that nature. He doesn't need to be giving himself the alleged authority to speak on these matters where he has none. But more than that, what he specifically said, and what was alarming to me, is he goes on Alex Jones, and he speaks to these paranoid delusion acts. I mean, there's no other way to describe anybody who would listen to his show voluntarily. And he says that these mandatory vaccine regimes are an indicator of imminent martial law. I mean, martial law. I mean, look, that is... I mean, does he not understand what that phrase means? It means the military is literally going to take over the government of this country if we allow vaccines to continue. Now, I assume that Rand Paul is smart enough to know what that means, and to know that it's never going to happen. It hasn't it hasn't happened when we literally did have mandatory vaccinations back at the turn of the century with smallpox. Why would it be happening now with the MMR thing? But in any event, I think that what you see is that there is this streak of anti-government paranoia that exists on the libertarian right, which I think to a large degree is healthy and an instinct that ought to be encouraged wherever possible. But I think that what Paul is doing is really kind of an obvious pandering to kind of the darker elements of that streak and the less informed elements to that streak. And my question is, what, if any, is going to be the electoral cost of this? I mean, whether it's Rand Paul who gets the nomination, whether it's anybody else, I mean, is the kind of need to give a wink and a nod to those folks to kind of keep them in the fold going to cost us electorally in the 2016 elections?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that he pays electorally. I don't really know if he will. One of the issues, I mean, aside from the liberty issues, which I think Neal correctly pointed out, I mean, if you have liberty issues regarding vaccines, just read Richard Epstein, and you should be put at ease rather quickly. The other issue, quite simply, is that, politicians generally don't want to offend anyone and are big fans of the pandering. I mean, let's face it, going back to 2012, going back to 2008, we saw Republican politicians being quite hesitant to bash birthers, and then on the Democratic side to bash truthers. It seems that there is a general hesitation to tell the conspiracy theorists to wake up and stop being idiots. And I don't think that, unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of this on both sides. I don't even think that it's going to have major electoral repercussions overall, as I think both parties are guilty of it. I do hope that
Let me interject real quick here. So kind of a key example of that to me was back in the 2008 campaigns. John Edwards, I don't know if you'll even recall this because it was so not reported on by anyone outside the conservative blogosphere. John Edwards was at a campaign event. One of the people who was there, he had an open forum. One of the people in the audience came and asked him a question. Do you think that the government had foreknowledge of the 9/11 truth attacks? And gave like this kind of rambling speech that indicated they were 9/11. And his response was, he pulled out like a pen and paper and started writing down, taking notes. He said, and he folded up. He said, "I'm going to go look into that." Now, that story was absolutely squashed. I mean, nobody said, "Look, that's an absurd response from somebody who's running for president to not know what you say to that question." But Republicans, don't they play on a different playing field with respect to the media?
They do, and I wish that they would have a few more stones and tell voters to stop living in fantasy land. But the fact is that these guys on the right and the left are robotic pander monkeys when they are on the stump. And that means that when someone spouts some sort of nonsensical theory, instead of saying, yeah, you know what, I'm sorry, that's crazy, they kind of give the Clinton, I feel your pain, I'm going to look into this nonsense. And that is the unfortunate reality. Now, I do have to say, I mean, I don't think that Republicans pay a bigger price here than Democrats. I mean, I think they everybody pays a little bit of price, but all of their pandering kind of offsets itself in the grand scheme. I guess maybe when you look back at the birtherism, there is more price to be paid for the pandering to the birthers on the Republican side than the Dems got on the truther side of things. And so maybe there will be a little bit more here on the vax issue, but I'm not so sure. There's so many vax skeletons in the left's closet. I don't know if it's going to get a lot of traction.
So, Bill, let me throw this over to you as the last guy to field a question, since you were the last one to join us today. What is the right way to kind of address this problem? I mean, if you grant that a proper function of the government is to ensure the public health, which I do, and if you grant that, by and large, at least in a statistical analysis, having everyone vaccinated is preferable to not having significant numbers of people vaccinated, what's the right way to solve the problem? I mean, Connor Friedersdorf had an interesting piece at The Atlantic that discussed this yesterday, and he proposed, listen, the way that we have to deal with this is, we have to shame these people, essentially, into complying with the regime. And there's been a lot of study about this. Like, there are some policies that you want to implement with the force of law. Look, if you don't do it, we send people to your house, take you to jail, fine you, whatever the situation is. There are some that you want to implement with, essentially shame. You want to encourage the public to take an active role in essentially shaming people who engage in a behavior. Smoking is a key example of that, and has been viewed over the last couple of decades. The shaming aspect of smoking has been shown to be one of the most powerful things in reducing the incidence of smoking. And then you have just soft persuasion. What's the right, as we face the reality, I guess, of an actual measles outbreak occurring in the country, what's the right mode for us to take? Do we come down with the hammer of the law and say, look, you people get vaccinated, or we fine you or takes whatever activities against you? Do we just encourage people, look, talk to your friends and neighbors, say, hey, go get your kids vaccinated, or do we just try to persuade? How's the right way to address this problem?
Well, a mix. I don't think anyone supports sending CPS into the home to take away unvaccinated children. But I actually think
anyone besides Neal.
everyone except from Neal.
I personally support that.
You support that?
Yeah, I support removing children from homes. Come on.
Oh, but not over vaccinations. And I'm fine with seizing children from bad parents, as long as you have to take custody of them. So you can just amass hundreds of LA kids in your home. I think that's the way to do it. Move them all to Steve's house. In terms of there you go. In terms of how to effectively, squash this, I think this is a non-issue, really. We already have laws in the states that say that you have to be mandatory, that you have to vaccinate your child against major diseases. Do I think we should, go pro-vaccination all the way? No, I do not. I don't want my kids to get the chickenpox vaccine, for example, because that's annoying to take this common disease that everybody has. I would rather them get it now so they don't have to keep getting that vaccination over and over and over again. For serious diseases like whooping cough and measles and smallpox, yes, you should be forced to either homeschool your kids, keep them away from the general population, or you should, if you want to send them to public school, and outsource your parenting responsibilities, then yes, you should be forced to vaccinate your children. And I think we really don't have to reform the system that we have too much. I think taking away the personal decision clause is a totally acceptable reform. although I would keep in the religious exemption for obvious reasons. I really don't think this is going to play in 2016. I don't think this is going to be a big deal issue. And if it is, the perfect Republican response is, guys, vaccinations isn't the thing that we have to worry about. It's the chemtrails. Let's all get together and take care of the chemtrails first.
Right. So before we move on, a couple last points. One is that for those with liberty concerns about compulsory vaccinations for things like attending public school and so forth, let me just ask you this. What do you think will happen when? What do you think the government's going to do when there's a serious whooping cough outbreak? How illiberal do you think the state's response to that will be? So, in terms of making choices, the shot is far worse than the hurting infected people up in quarantine and so forth. It's all about kind of thinking bigger picture. Beyond that, though, when it comes to the discrepancy between Republicans and Democrats, the polling on this issue, I have to say, Republicans, maybe in the last 10 years have been subject to, a lot of mandates and a lot of the politicization of science to the point where there's new reason for skepticism, and in this case, it's unfounded. But at the same time, when you mandate everything, the things that are important to mandate become less so. And the same thing goes with scientific discoveries, scientific proclamations from the government. When science becomes so politicized, you're going to engender a lot of skepticism, and that's really unfortunate in this case. But it makes a lot of sense why you've seen a decline in support from Republicans over the last few years.
I think that's an important point. We're gonna move on, but I do want to make one more point of emphasis about this. I think that you've hit on a very key thing that is a dangerous thing that has happened: the politicization of science. I think that if you look at this is one of the things that I've observed in the last week or so as I've watched kind of this particular debate unfold. There is a high correlation between the people who are opposed to the mandatory vaccine and the people who, believe in things like, non-GMO food ought to be, mandatory, or labeling, or organic foods, and so on and so forth. And I think that is a result of the fact that there has been kind of a reason, if you will, to believe in the last several years that you can't necessarily trust the government entities when they come out and say something is safe, something is not going to be harmful for you, and we're seeing the reach of that in directly injurious ways, and the fact that we have diseases that we thought were eradicated for years that are essentially back on the rise now because people have lost their trust in their institutions to deal with them in the science straight. So let's move on to a little bit lighter of a subject, and let's talk about the Super Bowl commercials. Stephen, we're going to come back around to you for this one. You wrote an article at your own place, thewilderness.me, about the Super Bowl ads. And one of the things that you covered is that this was, at least compared to the previous Super Bowls, a very dark slate of ads, right? I mean, there were a lot of ads that were deliberately designed to be tearjerkers. You had the puppy that narrowly escaped death at the jaws of the wolves. You had the Nissan ad featuring Cats in the Cradle, which is a song designed to make every dad on the face of the earth cry. You had your TurboTax ad. Of course, you had your Nationwide ad about the kid who was already dead. And your piece really went into the fact that this kind of fits the mood of the country. Explain what you mean by that this slate of ads was actually specifically designed to meet what the mood of the country is in right now.
Right. It kind of ties back to, and like I said, the State of the Union, where you have President get up and he's like, everything's great. America's back. We're back, everybody. And the thing is everybody knows we're not back, and nobody says it. And we exist in a world where every day we're either tweeting or we're blogging or we're writing where we know that things aren't back. But there are parents with kids who aren't on Twitter or social media. There are people working 2 jobs that don't have time to get involved in this, but everybody does sit down to watch the Super Bowl. So all of these ads tap into that, and that was the point of why I put the Mad Men video of Draper doing the carousel. Is these ad companies know they know we're not feeling what basically this administration is selling. Nobody thinks this, and you know this in your everyday lives. It's like this palpable thing in the air that everybody knows. And Ogilvy, who produced the ad, is Mad Men. They've been around since 1949. When you watch Mad Men, Ogilvy and who did this ad, this is a company that knows what they do, and they've done it for 70 years, basically. And so you're watching this game, and you're sitting down, and you're expecting like chimps and ties working fax machines and banging on shit in the garage and all of this other stuff, and instead you get puppy death from Budweiser, where it's a sweet puppy commercial, and then a wolf is about to kill it. You get obviously the Nationwide kid, which is just an ad all on its own. You get our revolutionary founding fathers. They actually liked taxes as long as they could file them for free. And then the Cats in the Cradle ad, which is just like abandoned father in near-death experiences. There's a reason all of these ads were made. If it was one ad, if the Nation Kid ad alone was standalone, that's different. That's like, holy crap, like what, you just totally killed my day. But we were bombarded with these ads of just complete doom and gloom. We're all going to die. You had Mophie had the apocalypse ad, and there's a reason ad companies do this. They spend all year planning for these ads. So an ad company's goal is to not shift a culture. It's not to change things. It's to tap into it, figure out what people are thinking, so they can get a company and they can get consumers to buy the company's product. So there's a reason for all of that. Their goal was to tap into the consciousness of what we're all feeling. That's why we were all, for everyone who walked away depressed. I did, and like I said in my piece, I wanted to go look up the Sarah McLachlan ASPCA ad just to feel good about myself. Yes. I wanted to pop a Molly and watch Schindler's List. That's how I felt when I watched that ad. And I don't even remember the first two quarters of the game, or the last two quarters of the game. And there's and like I said, my goal with the piece at my site was to get people to realize why they're doing this. This wasn't done on accident. There's a reason, again, why we're all feeling this way. That's not, and it's contradictory to this attitude that we're being sold of ISIS is on the run, the economy's getting better, things are great, I've turned back the seas of I've turned back the oceans, and everything is wonderful. And people know things aren't wonderful, and that's what the ads were tapping into. And people argue. Go ahead.
So let me throw this over to Jay real quick. I want to ask him, what do you think about the effectiveness of these ads, right? So in the bottom line, advertisers are trying to do a number of things. I mean, they're trying to increase brand ID. They're trying to make people think of a product. But it seemed to me, and my colleague Bill S. at Red State wrote a great piece that argued that, or at least the title indicated the ads were leftist. But I think that the key thing that he hit on was there was a lot of guilting and shaming that went on in the Super Bowl ads. I think that was kind of the main motif for me. The Nissan ad about the dad, being away from his kid, the heroin ad. Was another big one. There was just a ton of ads that were designed to make you feel, guilty and shaming. So, what do you think about the effectiveness of these ads? Are they going to encourage people to go out and buy the products of the companies that were advertised?
Well, I may go out and buy Nationwide insurance because I hate that little kid. I'm glad he's dead. No, that's terrible. Well, hey Neal, what was the tweet that somebody had put up that you said was hilarious about that one?
Oh, it was Spencer Ackerman. I think it was the best tweet of the night, honestly. All he tweeted was, Nationwide, my kid just died. And I died for like 10 minutes. Every time I would go back and look at the tweet, and I just start laughing all over again.
See, can we talk about that? Nationwide's Peyton Manning commercial, where he's just doing everyday activities, was brilliant. And they moved away from that, and they moved toward dead kid.
Yeah, but the reason they said that is because we wanted to start a conversation, and this is what I mean, and I don't even mean about leftism. I see that, but I didn't get like this was about leftism and politicizing. It was about Adam Tucker for Ogilvy, who's the president, said we wanted to start a conversation.
About how terrible Nationwide is?
Yeah, well, no, they said we want to start a conversation about protecting your kids, a long-standing tradition, but nobody wants a conversation started during the Super Bowl. Just like nobody wants a conversation started about Obamacare during Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas Eve, and that's again where we're at.
Which is why the best ad of the night was the Fiat ad. The old couple with the Viagra pill that went bouncing down the building. Nobody remembers that one. That one was great, and then it landed in the car and it turned into a crossover SUV. That one was actually that was fun. That was the only ad that I thought was a lot of fun.
I would have remembered that ad, but I died.
And I was talking about this last night. I said I remember the ads that were always kind of a little fun, like the Doritos ad, the little kid where he's like, "Don't touch my mama, don't touch my Doritos," or the little kid dressed up as Darth Vader and his father, doing the remote thing from the room, and that was always the best part of the Super Bowl, the commercials, because they were so much fun. Yeah, these were like real downers. That Nationwide ad is like everybody's talking about it. I don't think it's actually, again, the effectiveness is, are people going to buy these products?
Right.
I don't care. You can talk about it all you want. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't translate into sales, it was a waste of time.
Right. It seems like a lot of people, and look, these ads are not cheap, right? So $4.5 million for one of these ads. The whole point of it is not to start a conversation. If you're an advertiser, your point is you need to sell product. And to me, a lot of these ads that you see nowadays are kind of missing that point. There are a lot of ads that come out that are clever and they're funny, and I think about them, and then when I'm trying to describe them to a friend later, I'm like, oh, it's the ad with it's for, and I can't even identify the company that it's for. That's a failure of an ad, because it didn't even impress upon me the company that was trying to sell. So just based upon that, I think that a lot of these ads really missed the mark. Neal, let me go to you with a slightly different question about the Super Bowl. Did you watch the halftime show?
No. I was being a good husband, and we switched over to Great British Baking Show on PBS. So I was watching a bunch of British folks cook puddings and cakes in a meadow during the halftime show.
Right. So neither did I. I also was switching the channel at the behest of my lovely wife, and I think that the Super Bowl halftime shows. When you headline a show with Katy Perry, I think that a lot of years the people who organize this are just flat out ignoring kind of the key demographic of people who watch the Super Bowl, which is males age 40 to 50. They drive the main bulk of the Super Bowl audience. Now, sometimes, they've had, the Who, Tom Petty. They've had some things that appeal to them. But, what do you think that the people who set up this show are really thinking and what they're trying to attract for a Super Bowl halftime show?
Well, I don't really see how any male could have a problem with Katy Perry on their television. Now, you just hit the mute button and everything's fine. And to be fair, I think that in contrast to the commercials that we're playing, the Katy Perry halftime show, from what I understand, I haven't watched it, was silly, good fun, and maybe was sort of an antidote to all the depressing stuff that was going on during the commercial breaks. I think obviously these guys in the Super Bowl, it's not just males age 40 to 50. It's it's younger males, and increasingly the women who were press ganged into service, refilling snack bowls and fetching sandwiches from the kitchen and getting beers from the fridge. So they need something to watch as well, and I think that they're aware of that, and they're sort of making a play for long-term audience. But yeah, I honestly, I don't think Katy Perry was a terrible choice for a halftime show. Who cares about the halftime show? It should be just mindless garbage fun, and that's what Katy Perry's great for, mindless garbage.
But your mileage may vary on the fun portion. So let's move along to we'll come back to the Super Bowl in a little bit. Let's move along a little bit to the continuing train wreck that is the interaction between Obama and the Republican-controlled Congress. Scott is going to get to field the first question on this. Republican leaders have announced, as expected, that Obama's budget that he sent, which was on time for once, is essentially dead on arrival in the Congress. They're not even really going to take it up. It's not even going to get a vote. I guess my question for you is, do you think Congress can pass their own budget to send to Obama's desk for him to veto?
Yeah, I think they can pass a budget. I mean, I think the House has successfully done so for years now. Although not, I guess maybe was it not last year or one of the years. But anyway, the House has done that a few times. I think the Senate can do the same. The question, I think, will be reconciling the two to get a conference, a final bill. That might be a little more difficult. But I think it still is something that can be done, because it is just it's a political rhetorical device, something to put on his desk and to veto. The one thing I want to ask about Obama's budget, and this is, given how much it was just such pixie dust and unicorn farts, and how ridiculous the whole charade is. My question is, why did he stop at $4 trillion? Why not just do $10 trillion or something really fun and exciting? And why only 4? It doesn't make any sense to me. And at the same time, will the media, the next time there is a Republican president, 2050 or whatever, why doesn't he submit a $7 budget? And will the media give it the equivalent amount of credulity as they give the unicorn fart budget? And because that really, to me, was the question as I was reading the stories about this budget. It's going nowhere. It's full of smoke and mirrors. It's an absolute joke. And yet it was treated for 2 days as if this was this serious talking point. What's in the budget? What are we going to do with the budget? And which is nonsense. So I really do wonder, if a Republican president were to submit his $7 budget, it would receive the same amount of serious thinker talky on TV and in the news.
Yeah, I think that you hit on an interesting point, Scott. Obama's budget, to me, was less about what I realistically expect to pass. It was more really a laundry list of things that he would like to say that the Republicans blocked.
Right.
If you want to be honest about what was in that budget, he had to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was never going to go anywhere, and that it was just going to become a political talking point. Well, I wanted to do this and this and this, but the GOP stopped me, and so I couldn't do it. And I want to turn this over to Bill, though, because I think that the last 6 years have set kind of an interesting precedent that ought to be examined in terms of where we're going to go going forward. For the last 6 years now, essentially, we've had Republican, the House will pass a budget, some years they do not, and essentially the Senate forces a vote on Obama's budget as is. Democrats have refused to vote for it unless there's an amendment process that it's allowed, and so it ends up getting defeated like 100-0 in the Senate as a symbolic vote of the Senate protest and the way that the GOP is dealing with it. So for 6 years now, since Obama took office, we've been running without a budget, and you have to predict that when a Republican takes office, or really whoever takes office in 2016, this particular charade is going to continue. If it's a Republican, the Democrats are going to turn around and do it the other way. And if it's a Democrat, the Republicans will probably continue their current path. And I guess my question is, are we entering a post-budget republic? Have we seen the last of the past budgets that we can expect to have in the next several years, at least until one side or the other gets 60 senators?
Well, I love how you use the term, whoever gets elected in 2016, because I'm assuming you're referring to Bernie Sanders' insurgent independent candidacy for president. We need to get a socialist in there.
Run, Bernie, run.
Yeah, exactly. Bernie and Elizabeth Warren splitting the ticket, it's going to be great. In terms of, are we past the budget process? I do not think that we are. I think the political leeway and the public opinion leeway that Obama has been given in terms of, basically operating on nothing but continued resolutions is based on a lack of public pressure from those in higher office that came from the fact that he didn't want to imperil his Democratic majority early in office with the budget, he wanted to imperil them with Obamacare, his signature issue. And then with the Republicans, he was just happy to kind of float along. And I think he played that well. I do not trust a Republican to benefit, to receive the benefit of the doubt from the media and not be crucified for operating without a budget. Nor do I expect a Republican to be, how should I say this, tactically brilliant enough to get away with it and skirt above it. So no, I think we're going to see a return to budgets as soon as Obama leaves office. What was brilliant about the way that Obama has handled this situation in releasing his own budget is his administration is demanding a gold star for the first time putting out a budget and calling on people to actually pass it, which they haven't bothered to do, in 6 years. So good for them. Honestly, good for them for going this long without one.
Well, I appreciate your optimism on this. I mean, to me, it seems like basically every president from now on is going to see, look, continuing resolutions have worked. It's provided an effective political football. I think we may have seen the end of it, at least for the foreseeable future, and it concerns me just going forward without a budget indefinitely. But moving on to kind of a different topic, and I'm going to turn this one back over to Stephen. Of course, one of the big issues that's facing Congress right now is Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, is planning on addressing the Congress on March the 3rd. Some Democrats are kind of threatening to skip the address on the theory that Obama was not adequately briefed, that the address is going to take place. He didn't give his approval and his kind of stamp of blessing on this address. Bibi and the president, of course, have had kind of a notoriously difficult and rocky relationship over Obama's 6+ years in office now. What's your sense of this play on the part of Boehner and the Republicans? I mean, do you think that this is good politics? Is it an effective way to kind of show that support for Israel has become really and truly a partisan measure, or is it going to backfire on them and kind of undermine, I guess, the moral high ground, as you might call it, inviting a foreign leader to come without the blessing and approval of the President of the United States?
You just kind of said it. They don't need his blessing. And it's like the way you put it is his blessing. They don't need his blessing. This has nothing to do with Obama.
But it is though. I mean, let's be fair. It's an unprecedented event.
I get that. I get that it's, should we break protocol? I don't really care what the White House says about protocol for two reasons. One is what we learned is that today from the New York Times and then via Free Beacon is that Obama knew about the Boehner's invite to Netanyahu prior. So this whole orchestrated spat about breaking protocol was staged. To me, it's like Obama is acting like the cops in Die Hard while Iran is holding a hostage and Netanyahu is John McCain. If you're holding these, the logic of the argument of the administration is, well, we're holding negotiations for nuclear energy and all of this stuff. And to me, if this administration is worried about negotiations falling apart because one of our closest allies in the world and in that region is speaking to Congress, then the negotiations are the problem, not our Congress and not Netanyahu. I have a huge problem with this administration talking to me about protocol when this is the administration that released Gitmo prisoners in the dead of the night with no warning, or strikes a deal with the Taliban to release Bo Bergdahl with no warning to Congress, which they're required by law to do. So I kind of shake off this whole protocol thing, and that's just about all I have to kind of say on that. Like, it's a joke. It's theater to this administration. It's nothing more, and I kind of hope all the Democrats get up and walk out. These are the same Democrats that booed God at their convention and booed Israel and were pro-Palestine. I want them to take that point of view because, again, we're coming into 2016. I don't think that plays well. So let them do all of that. I welcome Netanyahu. I welcome the Pope. Let the Democrats get up and walk out.
So, I mean, I think that you make a very interesting point here. I mean, regardless of the fact that this is an unprecedented event, this is a two-way street. I mean, I think the executive amnesty was an unprecedented event, both in the size and the scope of the power that was taken the other way, from Obama to Congress. And I think that Obama has taken a position over the last 6 years that he can essentially poison the well of the relationship with Congress, essentially without any consequences. And now that he's seeing that is not the case, Jay, turning this over to you, another issue that has kind of cropped up just today is that now we are hearing that the Pope may come and address Congress in September. What's your sense of that? I mean, how do you feel about the Pope coming and giving a joint address to Congress?
I love the Pope. I think it'd be great to have him here. I think that it's going to be interesting to see what people are going to predict what he's going to say, because he said. And here's the thing. People will say he has said some things that are kind of off the wall, and then of course when you go and you look at everything and you look at the actual translation, you look at the context, and you see everything, you realize, okay, what he said wasn't really that off the wall. He wrapped it around something else. I don't think he's going to create as much controversy as Netanyahu, largely because of his popularity. He is very popular. This is where you may actually see some of my fellow Protestants acting like idiots, because I've seen them kind of get all over this guy about some of the things that he has said, and and the thing is, he's not a political person. He's not speaking politically. So when he talks about poor people, when he talks about how rich people should behave towards poor, it's not a political statement. He's not Barack Obama. So I always try to tell people, get over it. Relax. He's not speaking from that point of view. Nobody's going to get up and walk out on the Pope. And I think what Stephen was saying about Netanyahu just kind of switch gears there. I don't think anybody's going to walk out on him either. I think it's just there may be a few here or there, but I don't think it's going to be any big production. I think it's great to have the Pope here. I think it's kind of cool. They don't visit. It's like they're all over the world. So when they come to the United States, it's kind of a big deal. I hear Neal's going to drive up when it happens.
So Neal, let me throw this over to you, and Bill, you can chime in as well as our resident Catholics on the show. I mean, Jay's hit on an interesting point about the Pope and him as a person and him as a public figure, right? So there are a lot of these instances that have happened where the Pope says things that people react to like, oh my gosh, the Pope said what? And then you go and you look at his larger context, and it seems not as bad as it originally was.
Right.
That having been said, this sort of thing did not happen with any regularity with either Benedict or John Paul. I mean, they were, I guess, media savvy enough to understand that things will get taken out of context, and we're careful enough to kind of avoid this happening. Well, let me back up. Do you think that that's a fair characterization? Do you think that they were just that much more media savvy than Pope Francis, or do you think that the media is a different animal now than it was back then?
Well, I think it's beyond question. John Paul II was very media savvy. Benedict, I would say, less concerned with that sort of thing. But the main point is that their pastoral focus is different. John Paul II was very much about opening the church to the world, opposing communism, blah, 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 all that stuff. Benedict, had an emphasis on more traditional role for the church and a focus on what the church actually believes. Francis comes from South America, which has its own unique history and its own unique politics, which have shaped his outlook on the world. And he has more of a focus on issues of social justice, which is a naughty word, it's a terrible phrase. But in the Catholic sense, social justice is, the pretty much the basic Christian approach to the poor and to the unfortunate. I mean, it's Christianity 101. So, we're not used to that from popes, and we're not used to, as Americans in our prosperity, it's understandable we'd maybe feel like we're being scolded a little bit for that. So, more media savvy. I think Francis is fairly media savvy. I do think that he could use a little more discipline in what he says. I have gotten very tired of defending literally everything that he says. I no longer do it. I leave it to other people to do it and explain the context. It's just it's
hey,
exhausting.
Neal, isn't it also like that Pope John Paul and Benedict, things that they said the media kind of expected them to say, and this is, Francis is saying things that they didn't say, so they're just like, whoa, they're not expecting this.
Yeah, and the media is, of course, looking at it through that American political lens again, and that's a major pitfall. Any kind of commentary on the church that you'll see is that people try to translate it into, well, what does this mean for my side? And really, the church isn't taking sides in American politics. The church was here before America. The church will be here long after the American Republic crumbles into dust. And so we're going to have our own thing going on.
All right, Bill, what's your perspective on this, on the Pope's visit and his performance, I guess, as a public figure?
I mean, the one thing I want to point out is the fact that there are going to be demands of the Pope while he's here, because the Benedict did show up in Washington, D.C., and it was actually a real blessing because Nancy Pelosi, for the first time, showed up to church again. She was like, hey, I'll get communion from the Pope. They pretty much treated it as an opportunity for a selfie. So I love it when the Pope comes here because Catholic Democrats all of a sudden come out of the woodwork and pretend that they go to church all the time, which is great. The other thing to keep in mind is the role that a Seventh-day Adventist played in Benedict's decision to come here. I met a Seventh-day Adventist who and profiled him for the Washington Free Beacon, basically because he was trying to recruit Francis to come here and conduct an exorcism on the White House and Congress. And I have to think that this guy was involved in the negotiations that are going to bring Pope Francis here. So we may actually see the first exorcism performed in Washington, D.C. in a couple of weeks. And I'm very excited for it.
Absolutely. I hope it takes.
I'm 100% all for that. Make that happen.
It won't. The reason it won't take is because he'll only be capable of performing just a quickie exorcism where he does it to the building itself, and that only solves infestation, and that's not enough to actually, get the devil out of all 15,000 people who work at Congress and the White House. Don't mean to burst your bubbles.
Question to Stephen. There was an interesting article at the American Prospect, words I never thought I'd utter. Interesting article at the American Prospect by Harold Meyerson about kind of the divergent paths that the Democrats face as they go into the next 2 years, anticipating the 2016 elections. And one of the things that he pointed out is the Democrats had essentially two main problems that they faced in 2014. Number one, there's a lack of turnout among both minorities and poor voters. Much less than what they had anticipated and what they had expected in 2012. The other fact is that they lost the white middle class by over 30 points. And those are two kind of diametrically opposed, I guess, political footballs that they have to decide to kick. He went through there, some interesting ways in which they can appeal to both, but ultimately the conclusion is they're going to have to choose which direction they're going to go. Do they continue to lean even harder left in hopes of having a higher base turnout in 2016, or do they try over the next couple of years to fix their problems with the white middle class? What's your sense of which direction they're going to go over the next couple of years, Stephen? And do you think that they're going to, and I'll say, in 2014 they attempted to do neither of these things and ran instead on just a war on women, which most people consider to be a sideshow. Do you think that they'll go on either of these two paths or on a third, as yet undiscovered path over the next 2 years as they try to position themselves for 2016?
I think you raised a fascinating quandary here. I think that all depends on Hillary, and I think that all depends on if somebody else gets in to unseat her. Which a year and a half ago, I was all for Elizabeth Warren is probably going to get in this and usurp her just like Obama did. I lean to I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're all in with Hillary, or as I like to call it, settle for Hillary. It's fascinating what you talk about with the moderate versus the kind of going full class warfare, full socialism. Hillary's digital team and her social media team and everything are all people from the White House. Jennifer Palmieri just left Obama's White House to go work for her. John Podesta just left the Obama White House to go work for her. So I think it's too early to tell how she's going to play it. The Free Beacon had the best thing today about how Hillary's plan is to tweet her way into the White House. And I think that to answer your question, Leon, they're going to see how just the waves go. Elizabeth Warren has the base. If you saw Netroots Nation, that was all about Elizabeth Warren. They all want. You have Mark Ruffalo. You have the Hollywood celebrities. Like Hollywood held a fundraiser for Elizabeth Warren's PAC, which Elizabeth Warren has nothing to do with. So they really want her to just go full left. Elizabeth Warren is not going to get in unless she's drafted. The Warren campaign reminds me of Chris Christie 2012. You know, we have to settle for Romney, but over here is Christie. I think it all depends on what's going to happen in the next 2 years. I don't think Hillary has a choice. She has her whole team is being developed out of Obama 2012 and OFA, and they need OFA's donor list and they need OFA's voters to get their message out. So I don't think Hillary has a choice but to go to the left. Obviously, we know that's going to be a problem because dead broke and class warfare isn't her strong suit. She's a New York elitist, Upper West Side Joan Walsh liberal.
And we saw that in the 2008 primaries. I mean, her appeal was exclusively to white middle class voters.
Yeah.
Wonders if she, as a candidate, is even stylistically capable of reaching the OFA.
That doesn't. Yeah, but that doesn't matter if we wonder that. She is. She's their candidate. So it's kind of like, does it matter what she thinks or not? To us, it doesn't even matter because that's who she is. Every time she's tried to tap into this populist movement, and Selena Zato had the best thing about this. Populism doesn't start from, New York elitism down. It starts from the grassroots up. So she's going to have a hard time.
Tell that to the gay marriage activists.
Yeah, well, it starts from the grassroots up. So
that was definitely.
But her whole team is coming from Obama's White House. So if her whole team is coming from Obama's White House, the goal is to get her to tap into Obama's message.
All right. Okay. Well, let's.
Leon, you're muted.
My bad, guys. So sorry about that. We're gonna cut off the serious question, the serious part of the program. We're gonna go into the lightning round here. We're gonna close off. Gonna run a few minutes over. Apologize. Thanks everybody for sticking with us. We have to have our lightning round questions, and we're gonna go. I'm gonna ask everybody on the panel briefly to describe what was your favorite Super Bowl ad. I mean, we've talked a lot about the bad Super Bowl ads, and I think that there were more than a few of them this year. But what was your favorite Super Bowl ad? I'm gonna go to Bill first. Bill, what do you think your favorite Super Bowl ad this year was?
Oh, my favorite Super Bowl ad by far was actually the one that Sonny Bunch starred in. It was fantastic to see Budweiser finally poke beer snobs in the eye for the fact that they love this fruity, terrible beer, and then judge the rest of us for it. So that was great. The other one I really liked was, and Sonny was right about this one at the Free Beacon, I love the Always ad because it showed that no matter how much you say, "You throw like a girl" is a terrible slur. Girls still throw like girls. And I thought that was fantastic for them to finally prove the point we've all been making, that girls can't run, can't fight, and cannot throw a baseball for the life of them. And I think the ad would have been more convincing if they said, "Oh, are you sure that only girls throw like girls?" And then they just showed Obama throwing a baseball for the first time. I think that would have been great.
All right, Jay, what was your favorite Super Bowl ad?
Jay's favorite Super Bowl. I'm just kidding.
Well, I already said before I like the Fiat one, but the other one that I liked because it was just so odd was the Squarespace Dreaming with Jeff, the one with Jeff Bridges, where he's just kind of sitting there mumbling, and you're wondering what in the hell is going on here. I just, that was one that nobody kind of talked about, and I just thought it was great because it was just so weird with him sitting there doing the kind of thing. So that was my favorite ad aside from the Fiat one, because those were a handful of ones that were actually fun.
All right, what about you, Neal? What was your favorite Super Bowl ad?
I'm kind of ashamed to admit it, but the Budweiser puppy ad, in the sense that it was the only ad I saw that elicited an emotional reaction in me. I tried to resist it, but you put cute puppy and Lost in the City and horses saving him from a wolf. I was like, oh, the puppy. So that one was probably the one I responded to the most positively.
All right, Scott, what about you? What's your favorite Super Bowl ad?
The Toyota father-daughter ad. As much as I hated being viciously manipulated by the advertising industry, I was tearing up at the end. It got me good. Great ad.
Way to cry like a girl, Scott.
You don't throw like a girl, Scott, I hope.
No, I don't.
Okay, good.
Sure you do. Sure you do. Guy with painting of lilies in the background of his ad. Yeah.
That's boy with apple.
Chintz curtains and stuff.
All right.
Yeah,
What's
sure.
A red jacket.
I'm sophisticated.
All right, Steven, what do you got for us? Favorite Super Bowl ad?
Who?
Steve?
Yeah, no, I'm here. I was just listening to Jeff. No, actually, Jay kind of hit on it. It's the Jeff Bridges ad, because I actually downloaded the album, and for the last 3 nights I've been listening to Dreaming with Jeff, and I've had the same dream about bowling with a crazy Vietnam vet and his imaginary friend, and I'm flying through Los Angeles to Bob Dylan. So no, seriously, download Dreaming with Jeff, because it is seriously the most psychotically calming thing you've ever heard in your life. Download the album.
Is it better than taking Molly and watching Schindler's List?
No, it's not. Nothing's better than that. Of course not. That's the best thing I've ever experienced in 15 years.
All right, so my personal favorite ad would actually be one of two. I liked the Brady Bunch Snickers ad actually quite a lot, and it wasn't really groundbreaking. It was kind of the formula that Snickers is fresh with the absolutely Steve Buscemi coming in that ad. I mean,
This is fascinating.
there, and it was just Steve Buscemi that just cracked me up. The other ad besides the Brady Bunch Snickers ad that I liked was the Liam Neeson ad for the app that I actually went and downloaded the next day just because I was so entertained by the ad, where he was talking about how he was going to, for Clash of Clans, he was going to go and take revenge on the guy who had destroyed his little virtual city. I thought that was a really clever take and really kind of self-deprecating for all of the Taken movies that he's done over the years. So those are my two favorite ads. So let's close off with one real quick lightning round question: yes or no? Will Brian Williams still will he still have a job as a lead anchor at NBC 1 week from today? Bill, yes or no?
Yes. Allison Williams, however, should be fired because she sucks.
All right, Jay, what do you think?
That's not all she does.
All right. Bill, yes or no? You think Brian Williams will still have a job as the lead anchor for NBC News 1 week from today?
I just said yes.
No, I mean Jay. Sorry, Jay.
We look alike.
Yeah. Same haircut. Yes, absolutely.
Neal, what do you think?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes, he has way too much street cred after founding the Wolverines.
Yes, all right. Stephen, what do you think? Yes or no? Brian Williams still in place as the lead anchor for NBC on 1 week for today?
It's the same company that employs Al Sharpton. Of course he will. We won't even be talking about this next week.
Exactly.
I tell you, when we discussed this earlier today, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, this is a tempest in a teapot. It's going to blow over. I'm starting to think the more the day has gone on and these revelations are kind of coming out that maybe NBC knew about it and that he was specifically advised not to continue telling the story, and maybe he did, I'm starting to think it's leaning more toward the 50-50 chance. Now, again, for me, I don't think that it matters because they'll just replace him with another blow-dried liberal idiot. So in the ultimate scheme of things, it's not going to matter. But I'm starting to not be as sanguine about the future of Brian Williams' career at NBC as I was even earlier on today.
NBC Nightly News with Chris L. Hayes.
I think Leon Wolf will be the host of NBC Nightly News. I think you should send your reel, Neal. I meant Leon.
Right on.
I mean,
Whatever. Both your names.
I can read very well. If people
Neal and I are going to be too busy running for president to anchor the NBC Nightly News.
Oh, that's true.
So
they have the same haircut as well, Bill. So.
All right, guys. Time to wrap up the program. I want to thank you all for being with us and watching tonight. I want to thank all of my panelists for taking time out of their busy week to join me and to contribute their thoughts. I want to thank Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute for being with us. Thank you, Neal Doing of the Federalist, Jay Caruso, Pocket Full of Liberty, F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon, and thank you to our guest panelists, the inimitable Red Steez on Twitter. We appreciate you being with us and appreciate our audience as well. Thanks for joining us, and come back next week on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends.
I don't like our audience.
No duels.